Right. So, just wanted to continue past few weeks we've been discussing business transactions with churches, the like. We've discussed having a church as a tenant, renting to them, selling a property to them. This week I'd like to discuss the inverse of that: purchasing a property or renting from a church, having the church as your landlord. So there you go. So can you buy from a church? So the discussion last week was that of Nename Avodah Zarah. You had Hana from the proceeds of Avodah Zarah. They were paying you rent. They were purchasing your property. The topic for this week is being Mahana to Avodah Zarah, is giving Hana to Avodah Zarah. We're going to start from page 56. It's giving benefit to Avodah Zarah. By you being their tenant, by you renting from them, they're receiving financial benefit from you. And is that an Isser? What are the contexts of that Isser? So the Sugya starts off on page 56. The Mishnah says, Misha Haya Beisai Samuch Avodas Pechavim. Somebody whose house was next door to a base of Avodah Zarah, V'nafal, and the wall fell down. Also, you can now not rebuild the wall because it would give Hana to Avodah Zarah. They'd have a wall. So Ketzad, so what should you do? You can't not have a wall to your house. Yasa koines b'say shaloi arba ames. He should go into his rishus 4 ames, into his property 4 ames. Uvoina shaloi b'shalavedes kechavim. Either mersa avana. And you should go inside and build the wall. So the Gemara asks, if you're telling me that he can't build the wall where it was previously placed, rather he has to go in 4 amas and build the wall, you haven't saved yourself from betting to Avodah Zarah. All you've done is given Avodah Zarah another 4 amas of property. So the Gemara says, so what should you do with that 4 amas that you've created? Amar Rav Chanina. Correct. We have extra space. Amar Rav Chanina, the Avid like Beis Hakisa, you should make it into a bathroom. But how are you going to use it? It's in a public space. So the Gemara says you should use it. You should use it Beis Hakisa Delilah. You should make it a bathroom to use at night, and therefore there's no issue with tznius. But it's still a davar mos. The church won't have benefit from it. The Gemara says, but don't we say, Amar Mar Ezahu Tsunua Hanifna Balayla B'Makim Shnifna Bayoim? Somebody that goes to the bathroom at night only in a place, in a situation where you do it during the day. So Me'ikra Adin, you shouldn't be able to use this space as a bathroom. It wouldn't be tznius during the day. So the Gemara says, what one should do is one should grow thorn bushes on that Dalet Ames, thereby making that space inaccessible and unusable to the church, and you haven't given them a wall, and you haven't given them space. So the Gemara over here establishes, and the Mishnah establishes that there's an Isser to give any form of Hana or benefit to a Beis Avodah Zarah. If you turn to the next page, 58, we have a similar case that gives us a little bit more insight into this Isser.
By the way, can we take the knife and cut the bushes?
It's your property.
And when you don't put bushes and you put the wall, it's in your property.
The Gemara, the Mishnah says the following din. A city that has various bate avodah zarah, and they have various stores within the city that have decorations. Those that don't have decorations. Rashi tells us what does this mean? That any store that had a certain design outside means that the church will get a certain percentage of the profits that were made in this store. So it means 10%. There was a certain tax, a meches that was put on all the proceeds of the store to go to the Avodah Zarah. So what can you do? Can you buy from the stores that proceeds goes to Avodah Zarah? That's the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that they had Maisa b'Beishan. They had a story in the city of Beishan. V'amru chachamim hamutaris asur v'sheni mutaris mutaris. The chachamim said those where there's a meches, where there's a tax, you cannot purchase from. But those where there isn't, you're allowed to. The Gemara continues that Rish Lakish said that maybe it's only because you have hana from the mutares, they're good smelling, they look pretty. And no, the Gemara argues, Yechanan says, no, even if you don't have hana from it, the mere fact that the church is getting proceeds from the store means that you're not allowed to give them any benefit. It doesn't mean that you have to have hana. You can't also be nana to the church. You can't be mahana to the church. And that's how we pass in Shulchan Aruch. This is brought down, halacha, page number 60, in Siman Kuf Mem Tas, that any time you have a store that has an arrangement with a Beis Avodah Zarah, and the Beis Avodah Zarah gets a certain profit cut of the proceeds, then it's also to buy from that store. It's also to patronize the store. Ramah writes that nowadays it's not so common, and you don't have to be worried when you're going to the store that maybe they give proceeds to their local church. So if we, so then it might potentially be a problem. So what we're having over here is the following: we've established that when you are going to give money or your actions will directly benefit a church, that is usher. So now if somebody wants to be a tenant or purchase a property from the church, then seemingly this halacha would apply, and it would be a problem. The distinction though can be made is that it's pure profit for the church. The church, that's what we're going to speak about. Let's speak about that. How you buy a church. The distinction between our case and this case is the following. In the case that we brought to the Gemara, the church is not having to give anything up. It's pure profit. There is no transaction. So to give pure profit, maybe that's usher. How do I know in a transactional relationship that too is usher? Right? If you're doing commerce, it means because what you're providing to me has value to the money I'm giving to you. You're providing me a service. So who said that's usher? Where is that usher? What context is that usher? So there's a Mishnah on page number 62. The Mishnah in Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Nun Aleph from the base says the following: Avodas Kechavim Shahaya Lagina, page 16:2. It's marked off on the side. The Mishnah says Avodas Kechavim Shahaya Lagina in Merchatz, a house of worship that has a garden or a bathhouse. Nanin mayhem shaloi b'toiva. You can have hana from it. You can go to the bathhouse. You can go to the garden shaloi b'toiva, without giving them benefit. So now, how do we understand shaloi b'toiva? So Rashi tells us shaloi b'toiva shaloi yalu skar, that you shouldn't give them money. Meaning, if there's an entry fee, you cannot go and have enough in this garden because you're giving them money. But if it's for free, there's no issue for you to go to the garden or go to the bathhouse. So we clearly see from this Gemara, even when it's a transactional relationship, there seems to be an issue. According to Rashi.
But you make the argument that if the fee is not profit, so it's going to pay to cover costs, to mow the garden, to pay for taxes, to upkeep. You can make the argument that it's not enough to the church, it's not profit.
So Tosfos makes a similar argument. Tosfos says he doesn't agree with Rashi. Rashi seems to say that toiva means that they get a profit, that they receive compensation. Tosfos has the inverse understanding of the Mishnah. Tosfos tells us on page number 63, what's toiva? Toiva is that they're providing a free service, and thereby you'd be grateful and you'd give thanks. Oh, this is beautiful, the church for providing the service to the community. That's usher. To have anah, to be thankful to the church, that's usher. But if you're paying money for it, you're paying money for the service, you don't feel any sense of gratitude to them. There's no need for you to thank them. You're merely thanking them for the service they provided, and that's a business transaction, that's fine. So really, Rashi and Tosfos there's a big nafkamina ladina. According to Rashi, to go into the understanding we have now, to go into a business transaction with a church would be completely usher, even though they're providing the service. Whereas according to Tosfos, there would be no problem, because what's happening is that any form of transaction, if I am giving you a product, I am only paying you the value of said product. So we just changed hands, but you didn't necessarily receive significant amount of profit. They're not, because they're giving me something for it. That's what this is saying. So the big not, but they have to give something up for it. And that's a big nafkamina ladina, right? If you were going to speak about renting or purchasing or being a tenant, so according to Rashi, there would be a clear problem giving them money. According to Tosfos, we don't have the same sourcing in the Gemara and the Mishnah for such an isser. So if you turn to page number 68, I'll go to the sources that we're skipping in a second. Page number 68, we see that this machloikas, Rashi and Tosfos, is brought in Yeredeas in Kufam Gimel, where the following halacha, the Mechaber paskins like Rashi, that if there's a bathhouse or a garden and you have to pay for it and it's owned by a church, then it's answer. Whereas according to Tosfos, if you look, the Mefarshim, according to Ramah, if you look at the Mefarshim, the Ramah seems to have the das of Tosfos. It's only when you have to be grateful and give thanks, that's what it's also. But when you're paying for it, then it's mutter. So, at its base understanding, if you would come to the Mechaber and the Ramah and you'd ask them the question, I want to rent the property from a church, Mechaber would side with Rashi, telling you that it's asur, and the Ramah would tell you that it's fine, it's mutter. So being that we're Ashkenazim, at first glance, we would seem that this, for us, this seems to answer all the questions, and there wouldn't be an issue. But if you look in the Shach and Taz on the side of the Shulchan Aruch, the Shach and Taz both say the Iker din is like the Mechaber. The din like the Mechaber, that one should not have any form of a business interaction with the church. That's also called Bahana. So if that's the case, then buying a church, buying from a church, renting from a church would all be problematic. How does it happen that we see that's not the case? So I guess that stems to the fact the following question the Drisha asks. The Drisha asks the question, brought in the page number 65, the Taz brings it as well, that how can we say that according to Rashi, that the asur to go to the gina, to go to the bathhouse, and you have to pay. If we have a halacha, the shaiva, the candles that were used for the church service, a yid's allowed to buy it, and it doesn't have an isser of avodah zarah. Simple question is, seemingly it should be usher to purchase it, because the money, the proceeds of side sale are going to the church. So it's seemingly in direct contradiction to what we've just established. The Taz and the Drisha give the following answer. They tell us that when the church is selling the candles, it's not that they have a business model set up, that this is part of their yearly budget. They're not an American Candle. This is not part of their cheshbon when they do the books that will bring in X amount from selling our used candles. They have leftovers, so instead of throwing it out, they sell it. But it's just there to recuperate their investment. But it's not that they're doing with the cheshbon. This is what's going to allow us to function as a house of worship. As opposed to the case of the Gina and the bathhouse, they set it up in a way that the proceeds should fund the activities. So that's the distinction that they make, which, in terms of practical application of these halachas in the real estate setting, has great bearing, because oftentimes when a church is renting a property, you're selling off a property, it's not that this should cover their budget, right? When a church is selling off their building, it's because they have no longer use for it. It's the leftover candles. There's no utility to it, so they're selling it. So it's not that fact that they're set up. They set themselves in such a model that they should receive revenue from this source. It's rather that they have the opportunity. So the distinction there would be maybe purchasing a property. If you're purchasing a property It's a one-time sale of leftovers as opposed to being a tenant where it's constant revenue that they can factor this in.
That makes a big difference. It doesn't. What's the difference if you sell it, if you buy from a church, their church, you give them the money, one big lump sum, or you pay rent for the next 5 years, which is the same money? Profit.
If you have, let's say you have a church, the church has also, oftentimes churches have a school building. And the church,
Just like here.
okay,
Make it simple.
just like here, the church has a school building. And let's say they came and they didn't have money to function anymore. They want to function, they come, they want to just rent. We're going to keep the cloister, we're going to keep the church, we'll rent you the school building. Now, when you're giving them constant rent, what's that allowing them to do? That's allowing them to factor it into their budget. And now they can operate based on the revenue from the rent.
Let's talk about it. It's true. If there are other schools available, they don't shut it.
If there are other, correct, but oftentimes, right, you can only have these properties zoned for a school, right? Zoned for a place of worship, right? Who else? Let's want to use that as an example. Are there any other schools in the area that we're looking for a location? Is there a market for that? There's no market for that. The only people renting these properties and purchasing these properties are Jews. If they want to change it for commercial, they have to go through zoning. There's a lot of fees. There's a serious investment. Okay. Would they have continued to be a tenant? So that's going to be the case in the Mordechai, right? So we're going to see on the Mordechai. But right now, the Taz, let's say there was another school. It's a good example. There was two schools, a Jewish school and a non-Jewish school. They're both willing to pay the same rent, right? So, but according to the Taz, it would still be usher because you're right, they could get it from somewhere else, but now your money is funding the church.
And when you buy it,
When you're buying a church, the assumption is they're selling it. It's a one-time sale. They had a windfall. They had to use candles.
but they need the money.
And
what happens to the money?
what I'm
Or they support an existing church or renovate the church. They're not taking the
so if
money
it goes to the
buy.
diocese, if it does go to the diocese, going to the diocese.
Yeah, you didn't take the money to settle a lawsuit, you still have them because now they settle a lawsuit. If they wouldn't have the money, they would settle and they would have closed down.
So today, let's say the Shiloh is let's say with the Catholic Church. Catholic Church, the properties are all owned by the church in Rome. Question would be if you're selling it and the money's going to the diocese, and there's a certain business model that they sell to defunct churches and they use it to fund their activities. That's a Shiloh. Are you obligated to look into what they're using the money for?
Yes.
I would assume so, yeah. It's just, you have to find out whether
But you
100%.
never know what they do with the money.
So-
Sometimes they don't know themselves, they decide later. They buy it anyway.
So let's take another angle to this question. That was the answer that the Taz gave. And I think the Jerusalem says the same answer. The Mordechai gives a different answer. The Mordechai wants to make a distinction between the cases of the candles and the cases of the bathhouse. The Mordechai uses the following logic. If you have a bathhouse, your operating costs stay the same. Doesn't matter if one person uses it or 5 people use it. You have to pay the basic expenses to upkeep the property. So when an extra person goes, it's pure profit. Pure profit. If I pay to enter the garden, they don't have to pay more because an extra person used it. My $25 entry fee is pure profit. As opposed to the shayva, as opposed to the candles, the Mordechai says, somebody else could buy it. They have to give something up, and that thing they're giving up, somebody else would take it from them for the same amount of money. So you're not giving them excess profit. That's the Mordechai's line of reasoning, similar to what we saw in previous weeks. And I am not unique. In the church's eyes, there's nothing special about me. So what's the difference? Mali, if they get the money from the guy, Mali, they get the money from the Yid. At least this way, Yid will have an offer. That's the Mordechai's line of reasoning. The major nafkamina between the two is churches purchasing a church, purchasing a property from a church. Oftentimes, the only people that are putting bids, especially on rapidly growing Jewish communities, on church properties are Jews. No goyim have utility. So according to Mordechai, it's a problem. I am creating the market. I am the sole market. I don't buy it. Nobody else will buy it. Whereas according to the Taz. And then, but you have your point that they're getting money. They're getting money from me. They wouldn't have for anything else. If I don't buy, what's gonna happen? They're gonna close down. They're not gonna have. They're gonna whatever. They're gonna hold the building until somebody can purchase it. They're gonna lose money. As opposed to the Taz, we can argue it's okay. Why? Why would it be okay for the Taz? Because this is not something that's factored into their operating expenses. It's something, it's a windfall that they had, it's a profit you can make, but it's not, this is not the way they function. Taz is not like the Tosfos. Taz makes a distinction between when is something a business model, when is something a form of covering operating expenses, and when is something just an excess, we have an excess stock, whatever, and we sell it off instead of going to waste. That's a distinction. That's where the Mordechai. So in general, the Mordechai might come lakula if they have a business model, they own properties and they rent it out. So you might have a kula to go with the Mordechai that anybody else could be their tenant. So I could be their tenant, somebody else could be the tenant. And the Taz will tell you, no, this is covering their expenses. This is how they function as a business, if you will. It's usher. The kula would be, according to the Taz, if there's a property that only a Jew would buy, only a Jew would buy it, only Jewish people have utility for said property, then according to Mordechai, it would be a problem because you're their only source of income. He doesn't make a distinction between what's their motivation for selling. Whereas according to the Taz, that it's a big distinction of what's their motivation. Then if they're selling merely because, this is just, we have excess things that nobody else wants, we'll sell it, then it'll be fine according to the Taz. Okay. So that would really answer our questions, right? We'd have to make this distinction. Yeah, basically that's the Taz argument. It's just a bigger candle. Yeah, just a bigger candle. So something that we didn't discuss was somebody asked, what about we spoke about the past few weeks, being a property owner towards a church. Leasing to them, from them, purchasing from them or selling to them. What about being a lawyer or an accountant for a church? So Yikar Hadin, from what we saw, really this is what we saw a few weeks ago, you can argue that when you made a distinction between when you lease a property to a church, if your real estate is of inherent value, it's a property that you can't get anywhere else, then we said it's usher. But if it's one of many units and you can go down the block and get the same product for the same price, then it's fine. So the assumption is, with a lawyer and accountant, as good as somebody is, there's always somebody looking to replace you for the same price. So Me'ikar Adin, the place can say one can be a lawyer or an accountant for a church. But it's definitely not a good thing to do. It's definitely not, if you will, play Kurdish. It's the exact opposite. You're doing something that's definitely not positive. Me'ikar Adin, is it okay? It's okay, but unless somebody really needs the client, really needs the business, they should stay away from it.
Yeah.